Good morning, Justin.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Are you doing pretty well? Have you given up hashtag dandy? I haven't.
Hashtag dandy. Man, I gave that up real quick, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'm doing dandy.
You doing dandy?
Hashtag.
Hey, there you go. Good deal. Glad you're dandy.
Thank you for bringing that back.
Well, I just figure good things need to be reminded every now
right,
and then.
that's
So,
right.
Just trying to create some Justinisms.
You should show them our new sound effect.
I do. Here it is.
Oh, yeah. The record scratch. He's going to start rapping next.
Not today. Not today. We'll save it for another episode.
That'll be a very polarizing episode.
There you go.
Mark raps.
That's right. I enjoy the technology, and it's fun to hear some different things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, with the headset, you just hear so much more.
You do.
Or at least I do, I
like-
should say.
It's like, 3D listening.
Yeah.
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 Sometimes it's a little intimidating. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
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 It's good, though.
3D listening. I like that image
3D
too.
listening.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like that.
It does. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
it kind of and I was thinking about that even in the context of our subject this morning.
3D listening.
Yeah.
And our subject
Yeah.
is,
And our subject is faith this morning.
yeah.
And
I can't wait to hear this connection.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it in the context of, faith for me is this connection between, well, I'll put it out there, a triune God and myself, and other people, to where it's probably more than 3Ds, but it's multidimensional. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, and how realistically I should say what I'm doing is a result, or who I am as a result of people's faith before me, and the things that, will happen in the future will be a result of some of my faith seeds being planted, and it's just, I just think about that and recognizing God is sovereign over all of that.
Yeah.
So it's just very, it's not linear, in other words.
Faith.
Faith.
3D.
Or more. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the, in our aren't we up to like more than that now?
Up to what?
I heard 4D the other day, I thought.
4D.
Yeah.
I think, what is 4D? I'm trying to remember. 3D is, I feel like they call 4D when they add motion. Like those rides, that 3D rides where you sit in a chair that also moves.
Oh, okay.
I feel like they call that 4D.
I gotcha. Yeah, I heard that in a reference. It's like, it made me wonder for a second. Yeah. But either way.
Yeah, can't say I'm up to the latest D technology.
It's kind of X, Y, and Z axis, axis, so that's kind of...
Yeah, where's the next
where you adding another one,
Horizontal.
Yeah. But either way, so yeah, that's where I'm at. So
I meant to say diagonal. Horizontal. Sorry, I couldn't let that go.
We know we have fact checkers out there.
Right. We know they're going to do it. That'd be great to have a fact checked episode.
I will say I did get a good shout out from one of our listeners on it was on the Corey Ten Boone, when we talked about who wrote
they were shouting at us.
Yeah, my mother-in-law, she said, she said, that was so funny that you called that, because there I was just shouting into the, into the computer, into my phone, saying, it's Corey Ten Boone, it's Corey Ten Boone.
I think we heard her. That's why it finally came to us. That and Google.
There you go. No, it was just funny.
That is funny.
Yeah.
That's great.
So and that being said, we appreciate you, all of our listeners, just kind of comments and share and just kind of, so
the
it's fun
feedback is great. We love the feedback.
It's fun to hear.
Yeah. Even if you disagree or fact check us. I mean, it's just fun to have the conversations, as we say. So
Yeah, no doubt.
So faith.
Yeah.
What do you know about faith, Mark?
Not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Same.
I've really kind of been fact checking, recognizing that, when Jesus talks about, if you have the faith of a mustard seed type stuff,
Yeah.
and I want to, maybe I'm quoting that incorrectly. I'm not saying he said the faith of a mustard seed, the faith the size of a mustard seed, because you figure.
You want me to look it up?
I'm thinking about it as a size thing.
Yeah.
Versus faith that a mustard seed has.
Oh yeah.
You follow me?
Like a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Or simile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
faith like a mustard seed. Yeah. Now I'm gonna look it up, Mark, because I'm just I can't.
But I'm thinking about it if, in a reference as Jesus did it, and by all means check it out. But I'm thinking about it as, basically the faith the size of a mustard seed. You can say to this mountain, move, and, you can kind of throw it into the sea type thing.
Yeah.
And granted, I apologize. That's my best paraphrase. But it helps me recognize that my faith probably isn't nearly that big.
Yeah.
And you think of a mustard seed as very small, and I can remember, like there's the jewelry mustard seed, like where they can encapsulate. I've seen a mustard seed encapsulated in not epoxy,
resin.
Yeah. And it's just interesting to think about, But so I just recognize. Did you have it there?
Yeah, I got it on Bible Hub.
Oh,
you
cool.
know what Bible Hub is?
Yeah.
So I can read like 52 versions if you want.
No, I'm all good.
What's your favorite version?
Whichever you want to choose.
I like New Living Translation.
There you go. Go for it.
You don't have enough faith. Jesus told them. I tell you the truth. If you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible.
Yeah.
Faith like.
Yep.
Faith even as small as a mustard seed. So,
yeah.
There you go. We got that part down.
We did. Nice job. Thank you for checking that out.
Oh, my pleasure. We gotta start fact checking. So.
Yeah. But I was thinking about it too in the context of in our lives. Well, I would dare say today, especially in our culture, there is a ton of information out there. I was having a discussion the other day with an individual. What do kids, need to learn? And, and in reality, memorizing history,
right?
No offense, it doesn't really matter. I'm not saying history teaching doesn't matter. Don't get me wrong there. But, all the information, if you want to know what the Gettysburg Address says, you can, if you want to know whatever that verse was, Matthew?
Matthew.
Yeah.
Would you like to guess on that? You're pretty good at these numbers. This is numbers at this point, and you're good with numbers.
Well, it's going to be a guess. I'm going to go up higher, like 19.
Close.
Yeah.
Go down 2.
17. Okay.
All right, verse?
24.
20.
Okay.
You were 19, 20, and then 17. Wait, you said, whatever.
Yeah.
You were close.
Yeah.
Well done.
But either way. That's where I was at. But we were having this conversation about what kids need to know.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
A lot of that paradigm of how teaching works and what we learn certainly was created way before the internet was a thing, right?
Sure.
So there's this idea that like we have a limited time on Earth, 100 years max, and we want to try and carry everything that's been brought till now into the next generation, and it's on you,
Yeah.
And then it's on you to do it to your kids, and like kind of that informational carry on. Of course, books and all that. I'm but I'm just saying it's like so much of that knowledge is like what you learned in school is what you're going to have with you for your life.
Sure.
But like you're saying, what do they have to learn now? And I feel like there's certainly things they have to learn now but they are way more principle oriented.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that when you find the stuff on Google, you know how to translate it, using principles. And I don't know that we've necessarily come around to shifting the way we do education.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
And this happened to be a homeschooler that I was, homeschooling parent that I happened to be talking to. So, it's just,
Okay.
In this age, as far as having so much information available, it can be, it's almost like a redefining, like we talked about cursive handwriting.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, people that do that well, are still respected, but at the same time, it's like, is that something that we need to be teaching in our,
like a core part of,
And so it's kind of where it came from. But as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about it in the context of all the information, all the things that we hear, or see in the process of a day. And we can hear all that, and we can even think about all that, but the process becomes, it's not until our, the limbic system of our brain says, I believe
the lower
this.
back part of the brain, or
I know it's the limbic system, but it's not until the limbic system of our brain says, I believe this, that it actually becomes a transformative truth.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that in the context of faith, that how important it is to believe that, God is acting or willing to act on our behalf based on our ability to say, okay, there's no way I can do this in my own strength. And I think about, how many things there are that we desire to do, and yet I tend to do that at times in my own strength versus that wrestling in such a way that says, okay, yeah. And I'm actually, I can remember part of my faith. I can remember, we were, Chris and I were looking for housing in New York State, and it was at the top of the market. And it was like, we were
2007 or something.
No, it would have been like 2003, maybe. Yeah. But it was definitely the height of the market where we were at. And I can remember, we were looking for places, and it just seemed like, we were having to spend a ton of money, just to find something that we'd tear down and, remodel.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I can remember I was listening to Ron Hutchcraft as I was heading to work. It was a real foggy morning, about 6:30 in the morning. And it was just,
Is that pre-podcast?
Oh, far pre-podcast. Yeah. Far.
AM radio?
Yeah. Definitely pre this podcast. But like you say, 2003.
Yeah.
So you can bring the podcast history me up to date in podcast history. But I would say that was pre-podcasting.
Pre-explosion of podcasting, certainly.
Sure. Yeah. But
now I'm curious.
Yeah, but I can
sorry.
remember the year Ron, and he brought up I believe it's in Hebrews, he talked about, without faith it is impossible to, without faith it is impossible to please God.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I thought for some reason it was coming to without faith it's impossible
I
to
heard
trust
Linda
God.
shouting through it's please God.
Exactly. But I was thinking about in that moment, it was like God gave me the ability to say, okay, you can go forward and you can build your own house. And it just began a process of finding property and, and just began a journey of basically saying, okay, yeah, you're one person, but yet because of who God is, there was just multiple times. That was just a huge faith building opportunity for me and Chris, I would say, because there was just time after time when it's like there was stuff that needed to be done and people showed up, and it was like each time it was like, okay, God, yeah, Yeah, I'm trusting you in this process. I can remember, and maybe I've shared it, but it's still I had a good friend. His name was Rick, and we were at the point where we were going away for a wedding on a weekend, and it's like
the roofing.
This is the roofing. Have I told you this story? Maybe
Yes,
I have.
I think on this podcast.
Have I?
But I think
Well,
you should.
it's the Rick story.
You should share the whole story.
Well,
in
I apologize.
Context of faith.
Yeah, because this was like a faith step for me that I just so remember, and I apologize,
I
listeners,
don't
if
know
I've
if you
shared
did
it.
share it before.
Yeah,
so
well, like I say,
it's a good one.
but it was to the point that we were going away for a wedding, and I had lined up everything to be able to get shingles on the roof before we went away. And it was to the point that I had the boom truck lined up and everything, and I get this call about 7:00. It's like, nope, boom truck's down. We can't get you shingles. I mean, we could probably put it on a truck and bring it to you, but we just have to offload them, and it was like,
Yeah, and the idea of the boom truck is they would deliver it, but put them right on your roof.
Right on the roof. Yep, 2 stories in the air.
Yeah.
They'd just be able to, put them all right up there.
Yeah,
and
which kind of is the difference between one person maybe being able to
Yeah.
do it, or like a crew.
Yeah, in other words, I was good as long as they were on the roof, but I didn't really want to spend my entire day
hiking up a ladder,
hiking up
2 stories with shingles over your
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's
And it was like, okay, it is what it is. I'm not me getting mad, isn't gonna change anything. And then it was interesting. I was just kind of sitting there and thinking about it, and okay, what's my next step? And my friend Rick, who basically decided that morning that he had an open Friday and he'd come up and help me put shingles on the roof because it was something, he knew. And he comes rumbling up the driveway in his rollback, and it's, a rollback is a thing that picks up cars. He did auto body.
Oh, okay.
So, he had this rollback, and he came rumbling up the driveway, and I said, it's like I was lamenting, to him about my He says, I was thinking about bringing the Mustang this morning, but, I brought the truck. There's no reason we can't go pick up those shingles, and we'll put them up on the front of the rollback, and we can lift the rollback up, and we'll be right at the level of your front porch, and we can do the front porch, and and it was like, and it was just God. That was a God moment that He provided. And granted,
thanks for not bringing the Mustang, Rick.
Yeah, you remember the Bullet Mustang from the movie years ago? He had one of those.
Now,
the Bullet.
What movie?
It was specific. Oh, now you're asking me to. Oh shucks.
Remember, we're about fact checking.
Yeah, people are screaming into the microphone again, and it was a cop show early on, and there was. You can look.
I'm looking. I'm trying to see if Steve
was,
McQueen.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Right.
That was the yeah.
That's a nice car. You should Google it like I did, because you'll appreciate the beauty.
Who's the comedian and father of the bride? He's a Steve too.
Oh, Steve
Martin.
Yes.
That was the only part. That was the only. It's like I knew
Steve,
but it was Steve Martin. It wasn't Steve Martin. It was Steve McQueen. But he had, so that was his choice.
Those,
that was his choice, and he brought the rollback, and it was just, and it was really, it was a faith building step for me. And then, granted, there's been a lot of opportunities where I've been able to see God move, even with my limited.
Yeah.
Less than mustard seed size faith.
I mean, same. And just like even yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, some similar adjacent story is that we're, adding a little addition to our house, and, it's been waiting on some inspections.
Sure.
And, the person that's been doing the inspection for the city seems to me that he's sort of a stickler, right?
Okay.
And so, I was being prefaced about here's what we need to make sure we tell him, all this kind of stuff. Well, in my mind, this is where my faith was, okay? Well, he'll come. He won't pass it. We'll have a few things we have to do, and then I gotta wait another week for all the cards to align for him to come back.
Sure.
Whatever. That's where I was. Just this is what it's gonna be. This is what it's been. Kind of doubt, like no faith.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, this guy, he's, I had his name in my mind. I haven't met him. I'm like, he's going to come, we're going to have this conversation. We're not going to vibe.
Yeah.
he's going to fail us. Well, guess what? He didn't come. He was sick.
Oh, wow.
So this really awesome, nice older gentleman came. And we had a good old little conversation.
Sure.
And, when he's about to leave, he said, well, there's nothing else to do but to pass and pass. So there was 2 he had to check,
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's great.
Yeah.
And in my mind, there was no, this is kind of me, the thing about faith. There was no pathway in my brain to a different person showing up today or yesterday. There was only this one person, and I was pretty sure he knew what he was going to do based on, who knows what. Like, I'm not trying to say, there was no faith to say, he might not do that. I just had this feeling he would,
Sure.
Well, guess what? It wasn't him. Like, that's kind of the difference that faith can have, whether you have faith or not. There's a vast world of opportunities out there that we, in our limited vision, cannot see. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like Peter on the waves, like...
Yeah.
He saw Jesus walk in the water. He's like, oh, cool. That's a thing we can do. I didn't know that. Let's try it. And he got out, started walking to Jesus, and he goes, wait a second. We're not supposed to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
And started looking at the waves and recognizing the reality of what he just stepped into.
Yeah.
It started to sink, Yeah. And I think so often our eyes, right, are on the wrong thing.
Yes.
And faith operates best when our eyes are focused on the right thing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is the creator of possibilities. Not even the possibilities. It's not about having faith. Oh, maybe another inspector will come up, right?
Yeah.
But instead having the faith in the creator of possibilities to say, I don't know, but you do,
Yeah.
And faith is the substance of things hoped for, right?
Sure.
So, like, if I hope that a different inspector will come, that's not the same thing as having faith and then the substance of that hope coming through, right? Of like,
sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Because we can hope for a lot of things, but if there's no faith attached to it, there's no substance.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that's at times what can be a disappointment.
Yeah.
In our faith, when what we hoped for in who we are,
disappointment.
Disappointment can set in.
Yeah, because it's not true faith, right? It's like a crafting of a vision on our side, and when it doesn't align with that, it feels like our faith is not being honored.
Sure.
Or like, all the things we read about faith isn't true for me because that fell through.
Yeah.
If your faith was in that thing not falling through, then, I guess we're not really talking about faith right now, are we?
Yeah.
Right?
No, definitely. And I think about that in so many ways too, in the context of, I was having a conversation with a individual, actually a couple the other day on, like faith healing. And, and that ability to be able to say to, well, if you have enough faith, that context of, and I think that's what makes it complex is at times we can have what I would consider faith in God to come through in a specific way according to my desire. And yet it may not happen that way. And then, and I think at that point we can definitely say, okay, what is it about this faith? And I think that's the part for me that I can honestly admit at times can be confusing. Yeah. I have a wholehearted, and I would even call it sincere, I'll call it an expectation, maybe a hope,
a desire.
A desire. And it's like, but I also think that faith is that part to be able to say, okay, even when my desire didn't come through in my time frame, you know, my faith is still that God is love. He's just, you know, and he understands, and he's got something better.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, if your faith is in the creator of possibilities instead of the possibilities,
Yes.
when this possibility falls through, it means nothing to the final outcome.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know you're the creator of possibilities. So if it's not that one, you know, like you said, there's something better. And that's, I only want the better thing anyway.
Sure.
So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And being able to recognize there can be purpose in my disappointment.
Yep.
Because it helps me and I think that can be that can be a difficult thing, you know, for us to accept sometimes in our humanness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's for me, I think what does build up or bolster my faith to a certain degree is that ability to look back and recognize, okay, yeah, I've felt this before, and yet, despite this, God has come through time and time and time again in such a way that, you know, faith is a real thing.
Yes.
And, you know, and I guess that's where, you know, the stories we share, and I'm, you know, even in this morning, you know, it's like, there's a part of me that's, you know, thinking about different people who I know, you know, listen, and I'm thinking about them in the context of their own faith journeys. And, you know, it's my desire, or I think it's our desire, even though we hadn't necessarily talked about that, we want to encourage each other, you know, or others in that faith journey for themselves. And, you know, just reflecting back on that.
Yeah. 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 This is, you know, back to both of our stories, there's something about, again, there's a lot of times the disappointment happens because we put our hope in something that doesn't come through, right?
Sure.
But there's also a lot of times where the disappointment is followed with you know?
Yeah.
Like in both of our situations, we had this certain version of what it was supposed to be.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the disappointment comes, it kind of goes, just throw it on the pile of disappointments.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where it's like, just another time. It didn't, you know, I hate to say God let me down, so I'm not going to say it, but we'll just put it over in that pile. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We'll put it in that file.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, like, again, in both those situations, it happened completely in a way that I would say that was personal.
Yes.
Like
very
a personal
much so.
curation of reality for us to recognize God's goodness.
Yes.
Right? Like you said, I
Yep.
could have brought the bullet.
Yeah.
Steve McQueen could have, you know, driven me here, but instead, I
Yep.
brought the rollback, which is a new term to me.
That's it. Oh, like,
Right.
yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, just it's so specific.
Yep.
You know?
And I think about that. It's interesting to me, you know, I guess when you were saying opportunities, you know, God of the opportunities, the interesting part for me in that is it's not typically just the fact that the boom truck broke down. You know what I'm saying? It's, you know, because I had my plan, but I stop and think about that in a moment. And it's like how often actually God chooses other people to show up at the right time. You know, that it's his ability to orchestrate, you know, and have people not just, and granted, when we tend to think of faith, we think of, you know, parting the Red Sea and, you know, and building an ark and stuff like that. But I also think about, you know, how many people have shown up for me. Granted, I'm not sure too many people showed up for Noah to help him build the ark based on the story. You know, it was kind of probably him and his family, because it sounds like everybody else was kind of, you know, jeering him on in the process, not cheering him, but, you know, jeering him in the process. And I, you know, so I can't say that people showed up for him, but yeah. And then again, there's something to be said if God shows up, you you don't need any other people.
Nope. Yeah, that's all you need.
But yeah, it's just thinking about that in the context of how often, someone sends the message at the right time, or, shows up kind of unplanned, unannounced, and says, I just thought you might need this or something, and that's another aspect, that it just helps build a faith in a God who cares about where we're at and what's going on in our lives, and it's personal. And
yeah, I think it definitely adds to the personal nature of the interaction. And just because, I mean, I guess interestingly enough, it feels obvious that he can move mountains. It feels not obvious that he can make, Rick show up with this rollback. Like, that seems more difficult, Yeah. I don't know, or like less likely than just move the mountain, like fix the boom truck. Like, you can do that. I mean, but you bringing Rick over here in his rollback, I mean, when was that going to be in your mind of a prayer, right? Like, I don't know. I think it's much easier for us to envision, the reality or ability of, physical things to change than it is to think about people changing or people coming through. Maybe. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say it that way, because I would have thought about it in the opposite direction.
Really?
Not just because this is polarizing topics on.
No, now it is. Let's go to
Exactly.
town.
But I think for me, it is how often you see people.
Cool.
You know, and it's like, and I think from my perspective,
I guess I'm jaded, Mark.
well, I think so often it is about the mountain being moved by God gathering his people together in a unified way.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how much was your faith impacted by, when there's a lot of people praying for Jewel when she goes through an operation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that's part of for me at times, that's easier to see how God uses people in such a way, than he does, okay, God, go ahead and build this building. My faith could see that the building could be built, but yet it's going to be the interactions, it's the relationships, it's the people that he orchestrates. And I guess that for me, I've seen that more so than, the mountains just being moved because I said so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't thrown too many mountains into the sea,
Just a few.
But none would actually be the correct count, but since we're fact checking. But and I guess that is how I see it is, and I'll be honest too. I think of so often when I think of our listeners, I think what brings them to mind, and especially in a topic like this, are shared moments of, helping fulfill a vision. And I see those individuals as provision by God for that faith to see something happen, and I guess I just see how, even our process of moving to North Carolina, so much of that was orchestrated through a faith, that Chris and I shared, that even though we had built that house, we had that perspective that Jonah had when he was when he was, kind of sinking, and he talks about the seaweed being wrapped around his neck. And he talked about, I have exchanged worthless idols. I've sought worthless idols in exchange for the blessings of God. And that's what his thought was, kind of as he was lowering down through the water. And that was really, big for Chris and I. And it was funny because God brought that verse to us kind of separately.
Wow.
And even, the whole, it's impossible to please God without faith. It's like, okay, this is something we need to do. We're not sure exactly why, but this is part of our journey, and we're feeling led to be a part of this church plant, in Wilmington, So I think, when I think about faith, I tend to think about other people who have joined in that journey and, helped create that faith step for me, and recognizing that, yes, like I said, God is sufficient, but just by himself. But yeah, he doesn't necessarily always do that way in my life. He might know that I just need other people alongside.
Yeah.
Because
Well, part of the faith journey for any believer or whatever is understanding that God knows what you need, and
True.
so I think the other thing too that one should know about God is that he usually operates on the long game.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so often our prayers are very short game focused, and like we're human, and so we have a limited vision.
Sure. Help me win the lottery, I can pay off my debt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And and a lot of our prayers are day to day, and they should be. This is not about how we should, it's not about us, I guess, but it is about his answers often reflect his long-term love for us, and
sure,
like I say, the long game. And so
that was a wisdom scratch if you heard it there from Justin. Scratching his chin.
It's another sound effect.
A little rap there for
scratch.
you. That's right.
Wow. Man. I've often had conversations, I want to say recently in the last couple of years, with people about struggles and understanding, in relational struggles, and understanding that the solution you want to instantly fix this may not align with the solution you want for this person to be in your life in 20 years.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so, it's like I want this person to behave, so I'm going to yell. Right? And I'll get them in line. But that doesn't align with a long-term relational view that says in 20 years that person's going to come to me for wisdom or advice or whatever. And so, I've had a lot of those conversations, and I guess it makes me think about, I wonder if that's what my good father is doing,
Sure.
where it's like, I know you want this, but it doesn't align with the long-term, game, the long-term vision that I have for you, and I have plans for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, a plan of vision and hope. And it doesn't include, instantly fixing the behavior of your child or whatever, whatever it is. Right.
Yeah.
And, so I think a lot of times we're disappointed because we didn't get our way right in the moment. And our good father says, no, that's not the best for you.
Yeah.
What's best is that you go through this, and in 10 years, you'll remember this moment. And that's, I don't know, like, and I think it's easy to forget that until the fruition of those things in 10 years.
Yeah.
Like a lot of our faith is, the Bible talks about faith being like a seed a lot, right? It doesn't often talk about, like it talks a lot about faith being like seeds thrown, and some get caught in thorns, some, and some grow or whatever. It doesn't often talk about what that faith becomes when it becomes a tree or plant or whatever.
Sure.
But I do think that's when that happens, when the faith is fulfilled, right, in its fruition, you're able to look back and look at those seed beginnings and go, well, makes sense, and kind of see the progression of that faith. But that takes the growth of a season, right, of several seasons a lot of times to see that. And I think that's why I've often said faith gets easier as it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily, because I feel like it's kind of like playing Mario, right? Like every level gets a little bit harder as you get better at the thing, and so it gets a little harder. And I feel like a little bit faith's like that, because the more you believe, the more you're challenged to believe more. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think you have enough, you're a tree now, and you have your trunk and your branches and the fruit hanging out on the limbs as proof
Yeah.
of the growth process and of his good stewardship of your faith,
Yeah.
of your life through faith. And you can't deny that anymore. The trunk
Yeah.
is there.
Right.
The roots are there.
Yeah.
Right? And he planted, he like I said, 10 years ago, he said no, so that root could grow a little deeper.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, it felt like you're just trying to kill me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it through this winter season, if you don't do this thing. It's like, no, you don't understand. Deeper roots mean you will make it through this season and the next one and the next,
Yeah.
that analogy, I'm just going to keep stretching it until
That's
it
okay.
breaks. So
That's okay.
I probably should stop there, but I think you get the idea.
Yeah, and as I was thinking about or listening to what you were saying, I think age can be a factor. Faith and wisdom may be kind of connected together, and yet I'm still on that other end of the spectrum would be, God saying childlikeness,
Yeah.
And I think that childlikeness, maybe even with my age, is the ability to recognize a dependence. And I think, that's powerful where our faith is concerned, because I think for me, the hardest things to have faith about are the things that are within my wheelhouse or within my abilities to do those. Those would be the areas that I would typically have the most struggles with my faith, because there's a part of me that says, well, I can do that.
Right.
And it's
I
like,
should.
Yeah. And at that point, it's like, okay, God, I'm not sure I need you. I need you over here and I need you over there, but I'm not sure I need you right here. And that's kind of
I need you. I don't need you here because I need you over there. It's like, if I ask you to help here, then I won't. You won't be available for that help.
Exactly, because you're kind of limited by my circumstances. Yeah, that's exactly where it comes back to. It's like we see this dynamic that God needs our help, or I should say, I see this dynamic where God needs me to do this part. So that he can have the energy to come through on the other parts. And it's like, no, Mark, that's not what faith is. Yeah. And it's just interesting to have that kind of conversation as we discuss faith. So as you think about that, what would you say has been one of your most profound faith growing experiences? This is how I see it moment.
Always pulling out the deep questions on the fly.
No, it's not on the fly. We're 3/4 of the way into this. Come on now.
I should have known this was coming. Repeat the question. What was your most profound faith building experience?
One of them. Yeah, I realized, as old as you are, there's a number of them. But if you were to stop
what are you trying to say?
I'm saying you've had a number of them.
You're right.
You're not
40 exactly.
Exactly
40.
If you're using that 10-year analogy, you have at least
at least 4 of those.
At least 3 at least.
Yeah, at least 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, what do you got, Mark?
What do I have?
Yeah. I'm going to think about it.
Yeah. I would definitely say, building the house, like I shared, was definitely one of the first ones. If I'm going with a 10-year model, I would actually have to go back probably 3 years before that, and I can remember Chris was pregnant with John. And those doggone tests that you do, I say doggone in the sense that, it's a wonderful thing to be able to know if there's a health issue with your child.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. But I can remember a long weekend, and I don't mean long in like a Labor Day weekend. I can remember going for a test, to have, something read. And the concern with John was that, however your spinal column is developed, there's 2, pathways. And, kids who have Downs, kind of develop a third pathway. You know, it's not just it's not just two directions. And I can remember John was our first child, of course, and you know, you learn a little more as you go through that process. Each child kind of gives you a little more. And I can remember going with Chris, and it was expressed to us that based on that, what is it? The ultrasound. There you go. Based on the ultrasound, they were concerned about John having that third line. And it was a Friday, you know, when we did the ultrasound, and someone, you know, of course, mentioned that concern to us. And I can remember going home, and it's like, okay, you know, Chris and I both, it wasn't me. It was, you know, Chris and I both. And it was to the point of, okay, God, you know exactly what the circumstances are. You know exactly, you know, who this person, you know, this child is going to be. And I can just remember that being such a long weekend, saying, okay, we're going to trust you with this process either way, you know. And sure enough, you know, we were able to, but that was a long weekend.
Yes.
You know, carrying that. I just remember carrying that as, I remember carrying it as much or as little as I could, you know, based on our faith that, okay, you're the God of it all. And I can remember, you know, we definitely saw the doctor, you know, as soon as we could that following weekend, or that following week after the weekend. And it was like, yeah, I see where they're coming from, but this is also a part of a developmental process, you know, and all those things. And, you know, by God's grace, you know, short of a long labor and delivery, you know, John came out fine. You know, but I can just remember.
But you would have either way.
What's that?
I was just thinking about.
Yeah, he would have came out either way. Yeah,
Fine.
Yeah,
Fine either way. I'm just thinking about parents of children.
Yes, thank you.
Or whatever, and I think, you know, they would listen to this, and they would be able to empathize with that long weekend,
right?
But recognize a life of that you don't have, that they have,
yes,
as a result of having a child with Downs, and the blessings that it brings. And
I
think that's what likely your prayers and wrestlings were about. Like, I know whichever path is going to be good. Yeah. But one is really hard to envision being able to live through. All right.
Sure. Like, one is definitely more difficult in the context of my desires or expectations.
Yeah. And we all, of course, desire children, healthy children, and, you know, But I can see how that would be.
Yeah, that was definitely one, you know, and then house, and then, you know, the move, and, you know, and I'd say, you know, even where we're at now, you know, just kind of moving and redoing, and what Sparrow's Rest may be, you know, I believe that's kind of right now is probably, and maybe that's why the topic kind of comes to mind, because the faith step is important, and I recognizing, you know, there's people in the journey with us, there's, you know, and it's a process. Yeah. And I think, you know, things that are worth doing take faith, like you were, you know, alluding to, you know, building a tree, or I should say growing a tree, you know, growing a tree takes time, it takes faith, and yet, you know, God does it all the time without our help. You know, forests have been, of course, planted, but, you know, they're not all just designed. And yeah. Was that sufficient time? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely thought of several things. You know, you mentioned moving to North Carolina. We moved to North Carolina in 2006. Sure. But I can honestly tell you, the faith of that move was like a child. It was easy faith. It was like, yeah, we should do that. And it was first year right after we were married. And for both of us, it was just one of those things that God made it easy in our minds. It wasn't like a wrestling or this seems wrong. It was like, no, let's do it. Sure. So that's like, it's interesting how sometimes you get those and sometimes you get the wrestling, you know what I mean? I can say one of the things that has, built my faith in a pretty intense way in the last decade would be Celebrate Recovery and kind of the in and out of leadership there and different aspects of that. And, for several years, like that, I was leading that program and it required just weekly wrestling faith of like, it's all a volunteer-based organization. It's and so every day it was, okay, what's my part today?
Sure.
And problems would come and go, and okay, what's my part to solve this? And it wasn't like, I don't know. It's just like an active faith that was required so often of just praying through and going, okay, I'm gonna basically act on what I believe you're saying and move forward. And sometimes it would turn out well and sometimes it wouldn't. And I would still have to say, but I trust that that's what you wanted to happen here because, I definitely prayed about it and had, that faith, the active working daily faith that just says, okay, commit and go, commit and go. You know what I mean? And I feel like there's not... I feel like there are certain circumstances in life that require that kind of daily active faith, but not all. And I feel like,
how would you describe the difference? What would the difference be? What things would need that daily?
Well, I mean, I could be wrong in the sense that probably should live that way every day. So maybe that's a better way to put it. I think there are things in life that require that of you, and other things that don't, and therefore I don't necessarily act in that way, but probably should have that exact same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I was actually thinking again of Chris's mom, and after her dad, after Chris's dad passed away, and I think sometimes, and I think of people in depression kind of come to mind, even the next thing, doing the next thing. What is the next thing you need to be able to do? And I think that in itself is to a great degree a step of faith.
Yeah.
Because I can feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I can feel disappointed, and yet if I just stay there, it's not necessarily healthy long term.
Yeah.
But if I continue to, take each step and do the next thing, it builds a faith that there's more, and God's not done here just because, circumstances. And granted, some of those circumstances that our listeners, are facing or have faced are huge. Don't get me wrong there. I don't want to make light of that. But I think there is something to be said for, being able to grieve, in that process. But even that, I believe, is okay. What is my next thing?
Yeah.
Do I need to just allow that emotion to come and to go?
Yep.
And then when it is done, I do my next thing. I connect with other people. I guess that's where my mind went in that process. When you think about, okay, sometimes it is about the daily aspect. For some people that might be, getting out of bed, because I believe that's a tremendous faith step.
Yeah.
Depending on where I'm at, I think in this time, we've talked about, the big, maybe in some ways from my perspective, I don't want to use the word bigger in a sense of, more important, but yet, we've talked about those larger movements as we see it. But I think, there is some aspects of being able to do just the step, whatever the step is.
Yeah.
Recognizing that is a faith step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, with this struggle that you're referring to, like some steps of faith are huge, right?
Yeah, it would seem.
Yeah, it's
yes, in our
first,
humanness.
Yeah, like when man walked on the moon, that first step, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And but other times, like in times of depression or mourning or whatever, it's like you're wearing 50-pound shoes or 100-pound shoes, and taking those steps
Yep.
requires everything of you to get that 2-inch step, right?
Sure. Yep.
And I think
Agreed.
they both require the same faith of, yes, take the step,
Right.
And I think, I don't know, just thinking about what you're just sharing, I think it's hard a lot of times for people outside to see the tiny steps and going, what's so hard or whatever, and they don't see
Sure.
the 80-pound shoes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the deliberate effort and thought and intention that went into each step, where they're just like, I'm just walking over here. I don't know why you're thinking about walking so much. Just walk,
Exactly.
I don't know. That's an interesting paradigm, but it requires, it requires, I would say, an intense amount of faith to accomplish that, just like it does to move mountains, as we started the conversation with. And
and I think it is that context of sometimes the things that I'm good at, or the things that I can do well, I don't think about as being faith, but yet other people,
that's right.
who experience a completely different, dynamic of life, doing that same thing can be huge, in a context of the faith it takes, or so yeah. And I think, I guess in some ways my, thinking on this topic as far as the faith goes is it is a desire to, have our listeners think about that aspect for just a moment, and being able to recognize, and maybe even in a difficult moment, the ability to look back and recognize God's faithfulness, whether you're in a new location that you never thought you'd see, whether, you have a child who's dealing with a difficult, you're in a difficult life cycle stage, and just being able to recognize, okay, yeah, faith is important in that process, because I think, we can tend to look at our kids, with that snapshot thinking that says, okay, my kid just did this, they're going to end up there.
Yep.
And it's not a positive viewpoint.
Yes.
But yet at the same time, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road makes a wicked difference.
Yes.
And, and I guess that's my hope. That's the hope that I desire to convey, through faith, trusting that, if God has called you, led you, there's a purpose in it, and it's going to be good, by the time it's all said and done. But in the middle of it, and that's where I'm at. I want to be able to encourage people who are in the beginning of, a step, in the middle of a step, to be able to reflect back and look and think about it in such a way that grows your faith. And I guess that's where I'm at. I don't want this to be a judgmental thing, where it is about us and what God has done. But at the same time, it is a desire to share that hope, to share that faith in such a way to encourage others, encourage you and I encourage one another. And yet those who listen might also be encouraged in such a way that says, yeah, I hear where you're coming from, and I have those aspects in my life too. And maybe even if I don't have that aspect of relationship, to be able to say, okay, yeah, maybe I need to have some conversations about faith and what it looks like to, have faith in a good father, who has a loving son who desires to have relationship with us in a faith-filled manner that says, okay, I desire to know you and I want relationship with you. And, this is the opportunity for you. And it's just
the creator of possibilities.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. There's a song lyric that came to mind as you shared that: if the story isn't good, then the story isn't over.
Sure.
It makes me think of that.
Yeah.
end game God, the long game God. It's a song by Corey Asbury called "In My Father's House." So if you want to check it out and listen to it, you should.
I thought you were going to sing it for us for a moment.
No. No. But yeah, I think that's a good place to
wrap it up. Well, thanks for sharing, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, this is how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.